Hello and welcome to As Built, the podcast from Graphic Machine about architecture firms, buildings, and how both get built. I am your co-host, Patience Jones. With me as ever is
Brian Jones,
your other co-host. Thank you for joining us. Today we are talking about setting expectations for communication tools. Brian, what does this mean?
It's a really hot topic. Everybody's
talking about it.
So in any office, you're probably confronted with a litany of options to connect with people and keeping inside the firm, especially. And I'm talking less about external communications right now, mostly just internal to your organization. So you may have email, you may have Slack or a Teams meeting, you may have text, you may have your phone, all manner of channels that are more or less used by people. When there was just sort of like phone, in person, and email, we could kind of get our heads around like how, that all kind of work together a little bit. But now with the proliferation of these to various other channels, you may find that half of your team is using one thing, half of your team is using another, and they're using it for different things. And it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, it definitely can be. The thing I realized too is there's also like group editing function on documents and chats inside video calls. So those are two other ways that ideas are being communicated.
Yep.
And what happens is different people will self-select to communicate different things on different channels without clear guidance on what they're supposed to use for what and when.
And so it is incumbent upon you to set that out if you are in leadership, or to seek out the information if you are a member of the firm.
I keep thinking of that episode of The Office where Ryan develops Woof, and it's like you can send somebody a woof and it's like it sends the same message to every single, like it sends them a fax, it calls them, it texts them, it puts something on a beeper. Like it's like you can be everywhere with every message. And I feel like sometimes that's how we end up operating.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I got something to say. And it just goes wherever you happen to be at the moment. Why is that not great? Because it means everybody else has to be constantly aware of every communication channel and every alert that comes in, because you might be putting something in one of those. They might miss a key piece of information. And if they're not being hyper vigilant, which is exhausting, then something really significant might get missed. Because it was like, oh, but I left that note, in the chat of the Zoom call that we had.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't where I was expecting to find it. Now that project is in jeopardy.
There are generational differences within an office. And so there might be a predisposition to weigh heavily on, say, email over other things. And so understanding why you might use other forms of communication and why this may not just have to be communicated downward to younger employees, it may also have to be communicated upward to older people within the firm so that everybody's on the same page. It's really crucial.
Yeah. And I think I've seen in offices where people will say like, well, I don't use fill in the blank. I don't use email. I don't check email. I don't use Microsoft products. I don't use Slack, whatever it is. If you as a firm leader are encountering that, it is incumbent upon you to say, I'm sorry, that's not acceptable. Because if you have decided that method of communication is how you as a firm are going to communicate things like due dates or project scope changes or whatever, you can't have people deciding to opt out because it torpedoes using that channel as a plan. It is not effective at all.
And it's important to create sort of draft guidelines that exist as a document people can access, because I think saying it and hoping that people remember it is really just not going to work out all that well.
And it shouldn't be overly complicated. It shouldn't read like, 59 if-then statements.
No.
It should be, okay, for communications of this type, use this platform. Here's where we ask questions about projects. Here's where project due dates will be communicated. Here's where you can find, information about a client. Here's who you go to and how you communicate with them if you have questions. Because without that, it really is everybody for themselves.
And you'll find that things are missed or pieces of key information are splintered between multiple channels that make it hard to reconstruct something if you need to.
Well, and especially for firms with multiple employees, which is most, if person A asks you a question in Slack and you give an answer, then person B emails you and you give an answer. Even with your best intentions, there are going to be some minor inconsistencies in those two answers. Now you've got people who don't know, well, which version of that is right. And if I'm looking up to see if a question's already been answered, where do I go? Do I go to Slack? Do I go to email? Do I go to your office and ask you what's the best thing to do? I remember in prehistoric times when I had my first job out of school and email was like kind of just starting to be used a lot. And there was no like Slack or anything like that. And sometimes folks who were more senior, they would have like inter-office memos. And so you would have your assistant type up, blah, 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 blah. This is what I want to see. And then that inter-office memo would be delivered to your desk. And that's how you would get a piece of information. And, there were some good things about that, which is that it was very clear.
Yeah.
You always knew where it was going to be. There was a record of it. But we have so many more great tools available today, and we should use them, and we should use them for what they're good at,
I feel like the infiltration of these tools into the office happened so quickly. It was, there's a bit of catch up happening to make sure that firms have a clear set of guide rails so that people can be successful and know where they can find information.
Yeah. And knowing where to find it is really, you can spend a lot of time wasting looking for, where would I find that answer? Or how do I know when I get to an answer that's really the definitive answer and that somebody else didn't, put something different in a different place? It can cause younger staff to feel like they can't win, they can't succeed. And it can cause older staff to get really frustrated because they feel like they have to keep up on multiple fronts all the time. And you can decide as a firm that's how you want your culture to be, but it should be an intentional decision, not a default because there wasn't anything else in place.
So what do you think the important takeaways are?
Identify how you want people to communicate in the office. It's just that simple. What are the types of things people need to know about? And how are those things going to get? And then you stick to it. And that's probably the hardest thing, is sticking to it.
And then, as I want, put it on a schedule to revisit at least once a year in case anything's changed technologically or that you've noticed pattern changes in the office that warrant an update to that policy.
And there is something to be said for trying to change everybody else to fit you. So like if by default, everybody in your office has come to see the inter-office newsletter as the place to find out about what days your office is closed for holidays. And they're used to that. It's what they do. They go to it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you decide, well, I'm not going to put that in there anymore. I'm going to have, a special holiday channel on Slack, and I'm going to make everybody go to that channel. That's where we're going to have holidays. Why? You're going to have a lot of resistance. People already know where to go to look for it. It just doesn't matter. Like, you've got something that's working. Don't break it just because you can.
Yeah.
So thank you. There's like really nothing to say about breaking. I was trying to think of something clever for, break. Your expectations for my communication channels should be quite low. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.